Today is Monday, February 17, 2025. My name is Allison Sankunmani. I am interviewing David Rosario in Baltimore, Maryland for the Voices Oral History Center. We are in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Rosario, for agreeing to this interview. Just a couple of notes at the top. The raw, unedited recording of this interview will be archived at the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection on the UT campus, where it will be available to anyone who wishes to access it. If there is anything you don't wish to talk about, we respect your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to discuss, please do make sure we discuss it. Mr. Rosario, can you please state your name and title as you'd like to be identified in the oral history?
David Rosario, and I have two. One is business owner in Baltimore, Maryland. The other is board president for Latino Providers Network.
And if you are ready, Mr. Rosario, let's begin with your childhood.
Sure.
You grew up in Queens. Can you tell me what that was like?
Wow, let me take my mind back. So yes, I grew up and I kind of started the journey in Manhattan. And unfortunately, I lost my mom there very young of age. I was 5. And we lived in Manhattan. I remember not having a lot of family that were in New York at the time. So my dad pretty much lost everything, to the tune of living in his car for a couple of months because there was no family to take care of us. So he lost his job, lost the apartment, lost everything. And then finally, when family came, I remember family coming from Peru, family coming from the Dominican Republic, but family from Peru wanted to take us from my dad and take us to Peru, because my mom was from Peru and she had passed. So I remember my dad not having any part of that. So we kind of were disconnected from my Peruvian side, and Dominican families came, and then they took us on. I remember my grandmother, my grandfather, my tias, all being part of taking care of these kids that were left without a mom. So we were kind of raised being the Antonio's orphans. That's what we were raised that way. Everybody that met us, oh yeah, these are the orphans. I was like, it was kind of odd, but that's the way it was. And then my dad decided, hey, I think Queens is better than being in Manhattan, so he pulled us into Queens. And I remember, spending a lot of time on our own because my dad worked. So we kind of had to, be with each other and take care of one another. I remember my oldest sister being kind of like the head of household. She would cook and she would clean and she would tell us what to do and she would do your homework, and she was like my mom. And we are only 11 months apart. So we are what they call Irish twins. In fact, right now, as we speak, I just celebrated my 59th birthday, and she's currently 59 as well. Queens was a very non-Latino neighborhood. It was mostly Italians. So when we went there, we were not accepted because I think it was maybe the color of my skin. It was just not. We weren't accepted. It was a lot of animosity between our family and the neighborhood, and what is it going to look like? What are you guys going to do? And to be honest with you, some of my very best friends turned out to be Italians. They weren't that similar. I mean, they were super similar, right? So my Italian friends were first-generation Americans. I was first-generation American. Their parents were immigrants. When I visited their home, it was very similar. Like the same things they were trying to do and the same struggles they had, our families had, make a better life for my kids, try to get ahead, wanting to live in a better neighborhood for my family. They were all going through the same thing. So I didn't understand why we were fighting with one another if we all wanted the same end result. That said, years passed, this turned into a very diverse community. There were more Latin folks coming into Queens, and it wasn't just Italians. It was Salvadorians, Dominicans, Peruvian. It was a very mixed community. So when I was coming up, it was very Latino, and Spanish was extremely accepted now. So living in New York, I remember that we were still in silos, like Dominicans. I'm Dominican, so I'm Dominican. To me, being Dominican was being Latino. Like, that was Latino. I didn't really know much about Salvador. I didn't really know much about Ecuador. So it was like being raised in Queens showed me what being Latino was, because it wasn't just Dominicans. It was Salvadorian, Ecuadorian, Puerto Rican. It was a huge mix, but we were all part of this one big pool, Hispanic pool. So coming from that environment and then going outward was pretty unique. So I cherish my childhood I had a really great childhood. We did the things that young kids did in the 70s. Play outside. There was no videos. There was no phones. We rolled a tire down the street for fun. We went to the parks. So it was a really good upbringing. Challenges, absolutely, but pretty good upbringing in Queens.
I understand you grew up with quite a bit of siblings. Could you tell me, and then you also mentioned having your family come in. Could you tell me more about the culture around your house growing up with all your siblings and then having family members kind of help?
So we had a really unique situation, right? My mom passed away when I was 5. There were 2 sisters, and we were brought together to a family that had 5 kids, five kids, and we were kind of meshed together like a blended family, but the mom, and I called her mom, the lady that took care of us, she took care of us. We were drawn to her, and we started calling her mom. But my dad they weren't married. They weren't together. I mean, I remember her husband always being in the picture, which we started calling him Dad, because it was a blended family. Then when my sister was born, it became more of it kind of meshed the family. So it was super interesting because we were raised together like brothers and sisters, even though we were and it bothered my brothers when I would introduce them as my stepbrothers. They would say, "Why do you introduce me as your stepbrother? We're brothers." I'm like, "Yeah, but..." Now, they're also Dominican, but they're very fair-skinned Dominicans. So I was the dark brother. They were fair-skinned, relatively tall. We didn't look alike. So when I would introduce them as my brother, people would be like, "You guys don't look alike." So then I would have to tell the story. But they didn't want me to tell the story. They wanted it to just be, "Hey, he's our brother," and it ends there. But people were so curious as to, well, why do you look this way and why does they look that way? So I would have to tell the story. Well, we're actually stepbrothers. And I remember having such an extended family, because now it wasn't just my dad's family. It was my dad's family, this other family that we came in contact with and we blended with, and my mom's family. So we were half Peruvians. My brothers were not. They were full Dominicans. Mom was Dominican, dad was Dominican. We were not. Our Spanish was a little different because we were more of a South American Spanish, where they were Caribbean Spanish, so it was a little different. But when we celebrated, it was a mixture of a celebration because we brought in South American food and music, and they brought the Dominican music, and so it was a really interesting and very intense celebration because there were so many of them. And I remember sometimes we would celebrate with their family, and they would celebrate with our family. So it was pretty interesting growing up with so many, like seeing the culture and seeing the difference. Like when I would get together with my Peruvian family, which didn't happen much, there was a different type of celebrations because they were from Peru. They had different food, they had different music, so it was pretty interesting to experience that.
And I understand you said you grew up, when growing up in Queens, you weren't surrounded by many other Latinos like yourself, but could you kind of describe maybe already living there with the existing Latino community, or what you can remember about kind of the community that was created there?
In Queens, the community that was there, it was a lot of Dominicans when I was growing up. The Dominican Republic kind of kind of shifted. It was, if you know anything about New York and the Dominican experience and where they are, they're usually in Upper Manhattan. But there was a moment where Dominicans wanted to shift the Manhattan to the Manhattan, the Heights, what they're called, and shift to Queens, and they did. They shift. So I was always around a lot of Dominicans, and I remember for a span of maybe 10 years, it was just Dominicans. Like I would deal with. It was a lot of my good friends were Dominicans. The churchgoers that we used to go to, a lot of Dominicans, a lot of Dominican parties, and as you know, going to a Dominican house party is intense. I mean, they'll cram 100 people in a room like 10 by 20. I mean, and that's what we were used to. We were used to going to a lot of house parties growing up. So to me, in my mind, being Latino was almost like being Dominican. Like I didn't relate much to a lot of other, even though they were there. It was just me. Like if you said, "What does being Latino to you mean?" Back then, I would say it's being from the Caribbean. It's eating, sancocho. It's eating rice and beans and chicken. It means having habichuela con dulce. It means, los tres golpes, which is egg, salami, and fried cheese. That's what being Latino to me was. And it's interesting because when I moved from New York, it was almost like, wait a second, it's not just Dominicans. And it's interesting that, and I was already in my early 30s when this happened. When that happened to me, I was like, wait a second, this doesn't revolve around just being Dominican. So it was interesting, and as we move forward, I'll elaborate on it.
Excuse me, Mr. Rosario, would you mind uncrossing your leg?
Oh, sure.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Sorry.
How did you end up coming to Baltimore?
So came to Baltimore. My uncle had moved to Baltimore, and my dad and I came to visit. It was summer of '96. And we came to visit him because he had just gotten married. And I met a young lady here in Maryland. And at first, I was a little hesitant because we were 4 hours away, right? 4 hours. But we clicked so well that I said, hey, let's just be friends, because I figured the commute is way too intense. But as I got to know her, and as I got to know her family, I really thought, and I was 30. I said, I think this can go somewhere. Now, my first impulse was, hey, you need to follow me, because I'm, the Dominican guy, the Latino macho guy. So I say come, you have to come. You have to follow me because I'm the guy. That's the way my dad raised me. But I wasn't really too much into that. That's how I was brought up, right? So we dated for about a year or two, and it became serious. And I said, hey, I think you should come up to New York, move up to New York. New York is the greatest city in the world. Why wouldn't you want to come to New York, right? Because to me, New York City, the greatest city in the world, come to New York. She declined. She said, I'm not moving to New York. I've been there and visited with you, and I don't care for it. I like Baltimore. I'm like, but New York is the greatest city on earth. What do you mean you don't like New York? She goes, yeah, I don't like New York. So if this is going to move forward, we're gonna have to do it here in Maryland. So we backed off for about 2-3 months. We backed away from each other for 2 or 3 months because I wasn't gonna leave New York. She wasn't gonna come to New York. So I had to, I had to dig deep, right? But I didn't go to my parents. I didn't go to my parents. Well, my dad. I didn't ask my dad. I didn't ask my brother's mom. I didn't ask my sisters, what should I do? I was working with Sears Auto Center, and there was a really good leadership guy there that I really got to know well. And I just said to him, hey, I have this opportunity to go to Maryland, to Baltimore, Maryland. But I'm doing really well with Sears right now, and I like what I'm doing. I'm managing auto centers. I said, I really don't know what I should do. He said to me, you know what, David, doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter where you go. He said, cream will always rise. Huh. I said, interesting. So Evelyn had called me, and we had spoken. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do what you asked. I think I'm going to go and move to Maryland. I think I'm going to take this opportunity. So I went to Sears. I said, hey, is there an opportunity there? They said, yeah, there's some Sears centers you can manage over there. So that's how I got myself to Maryland. Now, it was an issue because my family was not on board. They were not on board with me moving to Maryland. My dad was not on board because he said, you are not supposed to follow the woman. You're supposed to be the man, and you're supposed to bring her here. So I'm telling you that you should stay here in New York and not follow Evelyn to Baltimore. I said, Dad, I have a question for you. So you want me to do what you want me to do, and you want me to listen to you. So how does that make me a man? How does that make me a man? If I'm gonna do what you want me to do, because this is what's best for you. I mean, I told him I get it, that you want me around, but I have to do what I have to do. And I'm gonna take the man and do what a man does and make up his own decision. And I did. I just moved to Maryland. And people were like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm moving to Maryland. I think this is gonna be a good thing. And here we are, almost 30 years later, and we've built a lot. We've got some great kids. We've made it work. So that's what got me to Maryland.
What was Baltimore like when you first arrived?
Baltimore was like living in New York City in 1972. There was very limited Latinos. There was no resources. English was certainly the language of choice. Not a lot of translations, not a lot of businesses. I felt like I had been in a time warp and brought back to the 70s because New York City, Latinos, Spanish, everything is taken care of. You went to Social Security, Spanish. You went to hospital, Spanish. There was a lot of churches, Spanish services. It was not like that here in Maryland. I remember shifting jobs, and I used to work in a Sears Auto Center in Fordham, Bronx, in the Bronx. Very cash-driven, very Latino, African American, a lot of blacks, a lot of Latinos, a lot of cash payments. And I shifted here to Maryland, and we went to Hunt Valley. Hunt Valley was farmland. Hunt Valley had a Masonic castle on top of the hill, and I could see it. I'm like, what a culture shock. There were no Latinos. I remember servicing a gentleman, and he said to me, maybe my second day, he said, hey son, I'd like to buy some tars. I'm like, you want to buy some what? He says, I'd like to buy some tars. I'm like, so a guy behind me said, oh, he wants to buy tires. I'm like, tires? I've never heard it that way before. So there was a huge cultural shift that had to happen. I was in an environment where it was all English speaking. There was no Latinos. It was hard to get Latino food. There was no restaurant that I can go to. So it was like being in a time warp and stepping back and have to start over. Like I remember 72 in Queens and in New York, and it being similar to Baltimore.
Before we shift more into the Baltimore questions, I wanted to go back and talk about your childhood and see if you could talk more about your relationship with your dad and what you may remember of your mom and kind of the values and lessons they instilled in you and what it was like growing up with your dad and then growing up with your mom.
So my mom is really quick. I mean, it was 5 years. And what I remember is an immense amount of love for her kids. Like, immense. Like, I'm protecting these kids are mine. In fact, that was the last word I've ever heard from my mom. And she said it in Spanish. She said, Antonio, cuídalo, son tus hijos. It means, my dad's name, Antonio, take care of them, they're your kids. I think she felt that she was never going to see us again, because when I remember that was the last thing she said, and I left the car, and I was only 5. She had a strong sense of prayer. We always prayed at night, always prayed at night. It wasn't a huge, intense 45-minute prayer. It was very short, very brief, couple prayers, and we would go to bed. And just to elaborate a little bit more, my kids, one is 25, one is 17. If you ask them what we do at nights, it's that small prayer I maintained. Maybe 3-4 minutes, say a prayer, they know it's bedtime. And even now, my adult child, he'll come up, hey, let's say a prayer, I want to go to bed. I learned that from my mom. And I learned sense of family from her brothers and sisters. Sense of taking care of your kids, taking care of, yours. Taking care of family. My dad was more intense. He was very, very Dominican, a very Dominican guy where, his word is law. We clashed a lot. But thanks to my dad, I learned integrity. I learned work ethic. And I also learned responsibility for moving myself forward. And let me explain a little bit about that. Because if my sisters were to hear this, they would say, what do you mean? He taught you how to move yourself forward. He stayed in his own little lane, and he never moved out of that lane, and he was okay with it. Looking at my dad and how he lived, that's what I did not want to be. I did not want to be that. I did not want to rely on, very little pension. I didn't want to rely on any type of government. I didn't want to rely on that. I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it on my own. So because of how he lived, I knew that's not what I wanted to be. I didn't want to be that. I wanted his integrity and I wanted his sense of work because he worked hard, but I didn't want to just be okay. His thought in his mind was, you can't work a lot of hours because if you work a lot of hours, then you have to pay more taxes. And if you pay more taxes, then you don't get all the money that you worked for. But my thought was like, I'd rather work a ton, and maybe if I pay $1 million in taxes, I must be making a pretty good living. That was my way of thinking, and he taught me that. Even though he didn't think he was, but he taught me that. He also taught me that you create your own environment, no matter where you are. I can be in Maryland, but I'm always going to be Dominican Peruvian. I spent a lot of my childhood trying to be American, but looking like this. And it didn't work. I couldn't be American. This was not your normal, hey, are you American? No, it was, where are you from? That was what I always got. My Italian friends would not get that. They were, oh, you're American? Where are you from, David? I'm like, I'm American? Well, where are you really from? They never asked my friends where they were really from because they were white, blue eyes, green eyes, blonde hair. They were Americans. Okay, you're American. Even though they were first generation. Even though my German friends were first generation and their parents were from Germany, they would not get asked that question. Even going through corporate America, I would always get asked, where are you from? And my friends noticed that one day. She said to me, it's funny because my dad is from Germany, but they never asked me where I'm from. But wherever we go, we used to do a lot of shows for wireless broadband. I would always get, hey, where are you from? So my dad taught me that you have to, make yourself worthy of wherever you are. He taught me how to be Latino. He taught me how to be Dominican. He taught me my culture, what we ate, what we drank, what we listened to, what our dances looked like. He taught us all that. So that we can, wherever we go, yes, I was born in the US, but this is my culture. This is what I bring to the table. And I'm okay with it. And I also speak the language. You may not speak Italian, you may not speak Germany, but I speak Spanish. So I took a huge liking to my culture, whereas as a child, I disliked the fact that I looked like I looked and I couldn't blend into my American friends.
I want to shift back to Baltimore and ask you, what changes have you seen in the Latino population since you got here?
Good question. And I'm going to get right into it because there's a lot. When I said I came from New York City as a very Dominican guy and I was brought into Baltimore, there was not a lot of Dominicans in Baltimore. It was more Mexican, it was more Salvadorian, it was more Honduran, sprinkled. So in New York City, oddly enough, I didn't understand the whole immigration thing. I didn't understand in my mind, and I not that I feel bad, but this is how I thought. I thought, well, if you come here, and being from the Dominican culture, like Dominican background, it's hard for Dominicans to come here and cross over a border. Difficult, because we got to go through the, Caribbeans, right? It's hard to get to the U.S. and come in as non-documented person, because you have to fly in. But it's not the case in Mexico, from Guatemala, from Honduras, because you can cross the border. So in my mind, I thought, well, they know what they're getting themselves into. So when a situation arises, why is it that there's so much pushback. They knew what they got themselves. They knew what they were doing. Wasn't fully on board why there were so many undocumented people. Being from New York, right? Because everybody there, I didn't see the whole non-documented issue. I didn't see the whole immigrant experience. I didn't see what people had to go through in different countries. All I saw was New York, the Dominican Republic. My dad came here okay. He's a resident. My mom was a resident. She came. That's all I saw. Here in Baltimore, my eyes were opened on this whole immigration issue. Non-documented folks. Why are they coming here? Right? Why? Is it because things are that bad in their country? What contributed to that? Why are they doing that? What rights do they have when they come here? How are they being utilized here in the States? And when I started asking those questions and answering those questions, I was like, oh, now I understand. So coming to Maryland, coming to Baltimore, opened my eyes to this whole issue that we have with the non-documented folks, a vast immigration community, not just Latinos, Europeans that aren't documented. I mean, there's a ton of them, right? But nobody ever says anything about them. Why? Because they look the part, right? Like my friends, right? They could be undocumented citizens, but they're never gonna ask them, hey, where are you from, right? So here in Baltimore, it opened my eyes to that, and it was like, I've been lucky enough to been born in the U.S. I'm lucky enough that I can fight this fight without nobody telling me. Sure, I get asked, hey, where are you from? Thankfully, no one has ever asked me, hey, do you have your papers? I think I'd freak out if anybody ever asked me that, but no one ever asked me that. But I can fight the fight, and I can advocate now. Here in Baltimore, I learned that, not in New York. Here in Baltimore, I learned advocacy for this community, not just the Latino community, but the immigrant community. I don't know if I answered the question. If I didn't, let me know.
How would you characterize the Latino community in Baltimore? And then can you talk about more of the changes that you've seen since first arriving here and how, as time has passed, how things have changed or maybe stayed?
If I had to say one word, and you said, say one word about how you feel about the Latino community. Proud. When I drive to work, when I walk out in the neighborhood and I see Baltimore City being rebuilt by the very same people that you say, oh, are rough or shouldn't be here or undocumented, or as they say, illegal. I try never to use illegal. No one is ever illegal. To me, no one is ever illegal. They may not be documented, but no one is ever illegal. And that's the word that gets me, it cringes when I hear somebody say that. That community of immigrants that are here in Maryland, Baltimore, rebuilding Baltimore, creating jobs for Baltimoreans that were here, integrating themselves into the African-American community and the more affluent white America. How? By taking care of their kids, by taking care of their landscaping, by taking care of their brickworks, by taking care of them. By doing the work that a lot of us don't like to do, right? You know, Baltimore is known for its crabs, right? Have you had the pleasure of eating the crab cake? So if you know anything about the crab, have you ever tried to eat a full crab? So how hard is that? I see some folks shaking their heads. It's difficult. It's difficult to eat the crab, to pick the crab meat out of this crab. This Latino community knows how to do it. And they've been used for that. So when you go around Baltimore City and look at this community that you so dislike or always talk about or always put names on, or they're the ones that are doing the work that are rebuilding Baltimore City. And I know many, because I tell a lot of the folks that come in contact with me, I say, look, you're in the situation you're in, and it is what it is. But that doesn't mean that you have to do everything on the side. Do everything that you can, as legal as you can. And for those that have taken on that and created businesses and created job opportunities and created wealth for Baltimore City, proud. And I know many, many, many people that have done that. So if you go out and you see any construction site, you'll see it. If you go to the highways and you look at the folks getting the work done, you see it. So my Latino community, my immigrant community that are rebuilding this city, I feel super proud.
In what ways do you see the various Latino groups relate to one another here in Baltimore?
So it isn't like New York. It's in silos, like Dominicans and Peruvians and Salvadorians and Mexicans, and I'm better than this, and I'm doing this. Da, da, da. I wish they would all kind of snap out of that and be more like me. I'm more of a, and I think it has to do because I have a Dominican dad and a Peruvian mom, right? I'm kind of both, South American and Caribbean. And oh, by the way, my dad is from Japan, because he's a Japanese Peruvian. So having all that culture, I've been able to relate with a lot of, like, to me, being a Latino is having that experience of leaving your comfort zone and coming to a chaotic place to start all over. Can you imagine what that experience is like? That's entrepreneurship at its highest level. I mean, you're leaving your comfort zone, right? And you're coming to a land that does not want you here, does not accept you. You have to live in the shadows, but you still make it, and you still rise. Man, that's incredible. That's an experience right there. So when people tell me that the Latino community just comes for a reason, negative reason, whatever negative reason is. I mean, we have a lot of stuff going on, whatever negative reason. I say they do most of the rebuilding. They do most of the taking care of our kids. They do most of our cleaning, most of our landscaping, and they do it with dignity. So,
How do elected officials treat the Latino community here in Baltimore?
so that's a loaded, but not that much, right? I've seen the elected officials try to embrace this community because they see what they're doing, and go to their aid. I've been lucky enough to work with many good government officials that have embraced the Latino community and what they're doing, and try to work through the issues that are obvious, right? And I've seen the negative. I've lived through the negative. I mean, I've been told, and you know, I did work for corporate America, and I did meet some officials that said to me, you know, not everybody is like you. You know, I've been told that organizations need to get more of me. And I'm like, what do you mean they need to get more of me? You know, Spanish-speaking guy who is U.S. citizen, you need to get more of those. I'm like, I'm not cattle. I mean, you know, I think, and I've told the elected officials, that it starts from an early age. It starts from elementary school. You have to teach our young Latinos that we have a lot of worth. Not only do we come with a different culture, but we come with another language. I have a full Latino staff in both my offices, with the exception of one young lady who only speaks English. And sometimes I hire them because they're so intelligent, but their English isn't where it's supposed to be. Not that they don't speak it, but it's not where it should be, right? And my customers will push back on me. I mean, they push back on me. I've had customers say, hey, you know what, I don't want to deal with the Rosario agency because I spoke to the agent and the agent has a harsh accent. I don't understand what he's saying. I mean, maybe with a slight New York accent, but not something that you don't understand. Some of my team, they do have that. And I tell them, even though you don't speak it perfectly, you still possess two languages, Spanish and English. And you're only going to get better at the latter one. And I always try to put that in front of wherever I go. In any type of political arena I'm in, I fight for that. I advocate for that Latino community, as they should, because public officials, you took oath to protect your residents. I don't remember if it says legal or not, or documented or not, residents. Residents that pay taxes, residents that when they purchase goods pay taxes, residents that work here, and oh, by the way, yes, $96 million worth of, or 96 billion, whatever that amount is, of taxes that they pay without getting any of it back because they use their tax ID number. They're paying taxes. So we need to protect them as well. We need to protect them. And when you don't and hide behind a veil of they're not documented, that's not cool, because they're still residents, they're business owners, they're homeowners. So all of the above, guess they pay taxes. They're taxpayers.
I wanted to ask about your job. I understand you're the president of the Latino Providers Network.
Yes, I'm a board president. We're a 501c3. But what did you want to ask?
I wanted to ask if you could describe what the network does and what it is.
So the Latino Providers Network has been around for almost close to 40 years. And when it became the Latino Providers Network, and I always get asked, is it a network organization in terms of wireless or wired? I'm like, no, that's not it's really a network organization where it brings in organizations that help the Latino community. Right now, we're almost 80 organizations strong. And what we do is we try to bring these organizations together and talk about what they're doing. And then maybe we can figure out what is not being done, what is needed. Back then, it was mostly medical institutions, because the Latinos would come, get sick, they didn't know where to go, there was no resources, they couldn't get medical. So a lot of medical organizations got together. Hey, what do we need to do in the eyesight, dental, whatever type. So it was a lot of medical organizations. So the Latino Providers Network was comprised of a lot of medical institutions. But as these parents started having kids, now it was an education thing. Hey, and as more came, they needed to acclimate themselves to Baltimore. How do we do it? Who do we contact? So there started the medical, then the educational side. And then as they started coming to Baltimore, it's a funny thing, because I remember going to Dubai and seeing a Krispy Kreme over there. And I felt so good. I'm like, I know Krispy Kreme. They're all over Maryland. I felt good about having that there. I saw McDonald's and Burger King. I'm like, oh, that's familiar to me. I'll go there. When the Latinos started coming to Baltimore, what did they do? They started creating businesses that reflected their food, their comfort stuff, right? But they didn't understand how to do it. They didn't understand the permit. They didn't understand the admin of it, insurance piece of it. So we created another for business folks, because now there were a lot of businesses, and me being in the insurance business, I kept seeing businesses start and businesses fail. Businesses start and businesses fail. Why were they failing? So I went to them and asked, why this is good food. Why are you, well, I didn't have the permit to do this, or I didn't have the insurance to do that, and it just became too much, and the tax side became too much. So we had to educate the Latino community on what to do, how to start it, having a business plan. I always tell them business plan is key. So the Latino Providers Network started growing. And then, of course, cultural and arts, because the kids that are being born here, right? Because if you, okay, I'm gonna put myself as an example. If I was never taught the Dominican experience, I was not taught the Peruvian experience as much as I was taught the Dominican experience. So I don't know much about the Peru. I just started, knowing more about Peru, but I didn't really know much about Peru. That cultural and art side of it teaches our young kids, hey, this is what the Mexican experience looked like, and this is what the Salvadoran experience looked like, and this is what the Honduran experience looks like. So we cater to those kids, and we try to teach them their culture, because they're not going to learn it, from the U.S. or maybe their parents, but if their parents don't teach that to them, it gets lost.
I wanted to ask you about the Feria Latina, which is a
Ooh,
event that happens annually.
yes.
Can you tell me how that came about?
So Feria Latina came about because we brought in a lot of organizations, right? And it was organizations, right? Organizations that take care of community, right? So we thought, well, we are bringing together all these organizations, and that's awesome. We know what each of us does, and we kind of get an insight of if I get a customer that needs some sort of business education, I know who to send them to. But we never brought them together so that they can then disseminate information to community. So we decided that Feria Latina would be a great place to bring all these organizations so that the grassroots community, the community that needs them, can then engage, and they can engage with them. So it's a great a feria. When we do it, we get a lot of kids, a lot of the community members, and in fact, we're kind of broadening where we kind of cater, because Baltimore County wants us to engage. And other counties want to duplicate what we have done, which is create a place that brings together organizations to talk about what is needed in community. Where can we help? What do we need to stop duplicating? And what do we need to begin?
What does the event mean to the community, and then what does it mean to you?
Right off the bat, for the community, it means going to a place that has tons of resources that if I have a question, I can ask. And it pretty much means the same to me. It means getting to know the people that we're servicing. Because a lot of the community don't really know Latino Providers Network, unless you're an organization, right? I think when they called me for this, they said, hey, you're board president for the Latino Providers Network. You guys will know who we are. My community really doesn't know about the Latino Providers Network unless we do the festival. Because all they know is that through them, I was able to connect with this HIV provider that did the test that now I have to get. That's all they know. So what I like about it, my passion, is to continue to connect providers with community. Because with organizations that don't connect to the providers, then why are they there? Why be there? There's no use. So you always have to keep connecting with the end user, right? The community, the grassroots community. And that's why I love it so much, because we're able to do that. We're able to connect organizations with people.
I know the network also does the college fair. Can you tell me more about how that came about and how important it is to the community and to you?
Super important. I said before that it starts with the, as young as elementary, teaching the kids that education is the way. And I know a lot of people say education, don't go to high school, don't go to college, it's a waste of time, but whatever. But I feel that knowledge is key. The more you know, the better you are. So with this college fair, it started very, very small. I mean, we would bring together several colleges and we would bus in a handful of kids. COVID did a number on all that, right? Because getting people together. But prior to COVID, when COVID happened, we had our last college fair, and it brought in close to 500 students. It brought in almost 30 different organizations, not all schools. Like I remember seeing Sherman Williams. I said, why? Why are you here? Why are you interested? They said, because we need to hire Latinos with that Spanish skill set, because a lot of our construction workers come to buy the paint and there's no one to service them. So that's how strong this educational workshop became. It wasn't just, let's get a bunch of kids together and just get a school together and let's just pair them up. No, it was organizations now knowing that the need was there. And capturing them young was key. But I always told the kids, no one can ever take away that diploma, right? For me, and I'm not afraid to say it, for me, it's okay, well, I didn't get my bachelor's, and that's always gonna haunt me. Because the moment someone says, well, have you had education? Do you have your degree? My answer is always going to be no. In fact, my son said to me, as we were going through the process of college, he said, Dad, I don't see this as a real thing, going to college, because I look at you and you've become pretty successful, but you didn't go to college. I say this to the kids that listen to it, any kids that are listening to this that are saying, well, maybe I can do it the hard way. It's the hard way. It is the hard way. No one can take away your degree. No one. What you know is what you know. I would rather have finished school and have that bachelor's degree and then move on to what I wanted to do. Instead, I did it the hard way. I learned things the hard way. I came through the hard way. I mean, I know how to run my business and I know what is needed, but I did it the hard way. So if anybody ever is listening to this and wondering, he became successful, maybe I'll do it that way. Absolutely no. Absolutely no. Get your degree. Whatever it is, technical, like we talked a little bit about that, having your technical something, but gain some experience while you're young and then flourish from there.
And I know you mentioned that during COVID it was harder getting the career fair going. And so I wanted to ask, during COVID, how involved was the network in helping the Latino community?
We were super involved. We became great at virtual meetings. We became wonderful. And we still had our virtual meetings once a month. In fact, we became really good at bringing folks together in that virtual meeting, because now you can do it from the comfort of your home, right? So I was surprised as to how successful it was. I thought it was not going to take on, but people people became experts at Zooming. People became experts at figuring out how to set themselves up, lighting, so that they can be present at the meeting. And so did we. In fact, one of our board members who never emceed any of the events, like live. She would never say anything. She would always be in the front door just taking. She was emceeing these things and she was amazing at it. So we adapted to that situation. And we provided information accurate information for community whenever there was a program that was out, whenever there was an issue, whenever there was something that was not right, we would be there for community. So we were able to bring in a lot of public officials so they can talk about what's going on, what are they doing, what's being done. So we were extremely useful in that time period because we were that network where everybody said, hey, Latino Providers Network, can you broadcast this, or can you broadcast that, or can we be on your show to tell the organizations that this is happening? They will come on our Zoom meetings, and that's how it would get done. So we were extremely useful. We still are, because our meetings, organization-wise, it's always 60, 70 folks coming to our monthly meeting. So yeah, we were extremely useful when COVID.
What did you learn about the Latino community during COVID?
That they're resilient, super resilient. And again, I'll use this word again, proud. They were the ones getting it done. They were the one, because here's what my thought was. So you leave your comfort zone to come to an unknown place that may work or may not work. And you make it work. During COVID, we were also in that period of time where we didn't know what was going to happen. Everyone was running scared, right? The Latino community was resilient. They were doing the work. They were getting it done. And we were providing information to that community so that, there was a lot of testing going on. It wasn't like, hey, Dave, Mr. LPN guy, can you please broadcast this testing that we're doing on people and we would like the Latino. I took care of that. I didn't distribute all that. I didn't want that to be, let's do the testing on this community. So we didn't participate in a lot of that. When they wanted to do there was a lot going on, and the Latino community was always willing, but there was a lot of folks saying, hey, maybe not this, maybe not that. And there were a lot of things that happened that we always protected the Latino community from. Maybe not this. Maybe we don't have the Feria Latina right now because of the situation and the temperature of the situation and the political situation right now. To bring in, 400 or 500 Latinos in one space, maybe that's not the best for this Latino community. So we learned a lot. We learned where we should engage, where we shouldn't engage, what we should and shouldn't do.
And with the network in putting on these events, is there any way of measuring the fair's success? And specifically, are there any examples you can think of with these events going on?
It's about who attends, right? High attendance. So, like I mentioned before, with the educational workshop, I wish I had brought pictures, but it was a full house in Baltimore County Community College. It was a full house. Like, the auditorium was filled. So how can you not measure success that way? Just looking at it from afar and seeing all these organizations wanting to engage with not just Latino kids, but with youngsters that came to that event. When we put the Feria Latina together, also attendance plays a big role. You see the interaction organizations, right? And you see the community wanting to engage with folks from the medical side, or wanting to engage with folks from the BGE, Baltimore Gas and Electric, to ask why this, why not that, what's happening with this, with schools, like public schools, for them to engage with public schools and wonder why this, why not that, why can my kid. So to me, a successful event is organization coming together with the end user and solving an issue. So that to me is, I'm good. I'm good with that. And sometimes, as a business owner, I get invited to talk about whatever topic in the insurance world. And I've been to some where there's two people. And my wife goes, "So how'd it go?" I'm like, "It was great." I was connected with two families that I spoke to them about issues, and they responded, and we're going to get together during the week to talk a little bit more about it. So volume isn't always success. Were you able to interact with somebody? Were you able to solve an issue per family? Now, if you're going after, were you able to solve an issue with the city? Well, now you're going to have to get more people involved. But one-on-one, to me, if I'm able to connect with one person and solve that, I call it success.
I now want to ask you about the Baltimore bridge collapse. My question is, what was your first thought when you heard about the collapse and the construction workers who had fallen into the water?
Yeah, when I woke up that morning and I saw that, all I thought of was, do I insure any? Are they any of my customers? Were they Latinos? Because I know, you live in the city, you know who are the people that are rebuilding this city. Who are the people that are working on the streets? So my first thought was, I hope there weren't a lot of Latinos working. I hope there weren't anyone working at that point, and I hope it was not as busy, because it did happen early in the morning. I hope it wasn't as busy as it usually is, and I hope that no one was injured. And as we know, the 6 workers were all Latinos. And they're celebrating an anniversary this March. And I was looking at the pictures, and I was like, it's been some time, but I remember talking to some of these young men about their insurance, and it's that story all over again. The Latino community coming and doing the work, rebuilding the city, getting it done, being resilient. And I gotta say, I'm proud of the work that they were doing. I'm proud of the city for doing what they did. There was a lot going on in that time frame, and a lot of our organizations that are Latino provider members, they were providing the service to them. And you asked me early on about the folks that run, on the political side, what do they think? And I have to say, they were right there with the families trying to get it done, both on Baltimore County side and Baltimore City side, because it kind of joins the Baltimore County and the Baltimore City. So they were there. They were there for the families, and they were there for all that had happened. The community is super resilient. Even though this tragic, because it's tragic. I mean, if you don't know much about that's a kind of like an area where there's a lot of traffic going on in the day. So a lot of these workers in Baltimore County have to get across to Baltimore into the city. So it's kind of tough. Now they have to go another direction, but that never, it's difficult, but they get it done, right? So there's a lot of resilience going on. And again, it goes back, and I can't say this enough, it goes back to what they've been able to do. I mean, you think about it, like I moved from New York to Baltimore, right? And sometimes I tell my wife, well, I moved from New York to Baltimore. That was hard. Yeah, it was hard. But I'm still a citizen, right? They're removed from the country that they're born in and had their entire life, some of them 20, 25, and you uprooted them, or they uprooted themselves to start anew in another country where probably they're not wanted. They don't have the documents, but they still get it done. They still get it done. And they find a way. They find a way. Now, every community is going to have their issues, but for the most part, these people are coming for the same reason I did, a lot of my friends did. At the end of the day, we're all immigrants, and we were all looking for that better life, better way of doing things, better for your family, and that's what they were looking for.
What did the mainstream media miss in reporting about the collapse?
Media. Okay, so they were really out there. Did I know about the 6 Latinos right off the bat? They only said there were a few, but we do have this wonderful newspaper and media guy, Somos Baltimore. I don't know if I can name them, but Somos Baltimore Latino. And they were right on it. I mean, they were right on what had happened, how it happened, who they were. The families were, and I respected this, the families were really, it's almost like they didn't want folks to have access to them. So I appreciated that and respected that. When we were having our our celebration, the LPN celebration, we wanted to celebrate the families, and we wanted to engage, and they said, no, it's better that you don't. So what we did was we presented some awards for the organizations that came out to help. I mean, the news was the news. The news wants to present news. They want it to be looked at. They wanted to reach a lot of people. So the news did what they were supposed to do. They spoke about what had happened. In our local news, they did speak of the 6 individuals that unfortunately passed in that incident. So they did what they did. The news did and they always kind of came to us and said, what do you think, how was the Latino community affected because of this? The people kept coming to my office. I mean, in order to get to my office, some of them would have to get through that bridge. The people kept coming to the office. They just went around. So it was tragic, but the community, and not just the Latino community, the community in that area was super resilient.
How effectively do you feel that the needs of the Latino community were addressed in the aftermath of the collapses, and did you think that the government did enough to support the affected communities of the collapse?
I mean, I don't think they didn't do enough. It was a tragic loss, and if you think about it, okay, let's think about it. Suppose it was 6 white families. Do I think they would have reacted any different? The resources were there. I remember seeing the sites and going to some of the sites and seeing public officials on there on the first couple of weeks, trying to make sure that the families of the affected workers had the resources that they needed. So I don't know that government didn't do enough. I mean, think about the loss. A ship barrels into this bridge collapse, 6 families on there, 6 workers. I think the information was dispersed really fast. Like everybody knew. Did you not know the day after it happened? You no?
I want to hear about your thoughts.
Gotcha. So I think that it was locally, it was dispersed in a timely fashion. I knew about it quickly, and when we assembled our Latino Providers Network, we said, okay, what are we going to do? What resources do we have to help these families? The county was already on it. Like there was a young lady in the Baltimore County who was already on it. She was like, paused us and said, we have the families, we're taking care of it, we're doing this, we're doing that, on the county level and also on the city side. So to me, there was action, there was a lot of proactive action that was done when the collapse happened. So I don't have anything negative to say. Looking at it from a person that's watching the news and has access to this community and is listening to what people are saying, could there be more resources in terms of money quicker? Sure. But I tell my community, you know what? Sometimes you have to look at what you're doing for self, what you're doing for family. And I thought about what my message is to all my customers. You have to prepare for the unexpected. You always have to prepare for the unexpected. Whether you're Latino, whether you're not, it doesn't matter. You have to prepare for the unexpected. And the way to do it is this way and that way. People choose not to do this because sometimes, like with my dad, my dad, and I'm in the insurance industry, and I'm sorry I'm going to bring in insurance in, but I told my dad, Dad, one day you will pass, and I want to make sure that we're ready because I don't want the same thing that happened with my mom to happen with you. With my mom, there was nothing taken care of. No insurance, no nothing. She passed away. Let's try to find money to do this. My dad did not have any money to do this for her final expenses, to take care of this, to take care of family, nothing. And I said, Dad, I think we need to do this. We need to talk about this. He said, you know what? I'd rather not have this in place because I don't want my family to celebrate my death. I said, celebrate my death? Because if there is this in place, it's more like we want this to happen so that we can get this. And I'm having this conversation with my dad, and I'm like, no, Dad, this is not what it's for. It's because this will happen to you. We need to prepare for this. And I have a solution for this. I have the solution for this. This is what we can do. He said to me, you know what, Dave? I'm going to do it because you're telling me to do it. But you guys will pay it. I'm like, I'm fine with that because as an insurance professional, I know the risk. I know risk will happen. This will happen. And it was in my family, and it was my dad. We're having this conversation, and he's not understanding that you need to protect the future, because this will happen, but you choose not to because you don't want to talk about it, because it's taboo, because it's not supposed to happen, and the family will come together to make sure that it does happen, but family doesn't always come together to get it done. When my grandmother passed away, I was sitting in the funeral, and my tias came to me and said, David, unfortunately, we need this much money because we don't have it to do this. I'm like, okay. So I had to write a check, and thankfully I was able to, right? Thankfully I was able. What if I was not able to, right? So I saw it again happen with my grandmother, and I told my dad, you see, Dad, this is what it's for. It isn't that we're going to celebrate. It's that there is a cost. He finally said, yes, well, I'll do it, but you have to take care of it. So I did. I wound up taking care of it. And when my dad passed, my tias would come and say, hey, do you need anything? Do you need anything? I said, no, we took care of it. He allowed me to do this for him. He allowed me to put this on him, so we are good. I'm not saying it was an enormous amount. It took care of the final expense, right? And I believe that everyone should also think about that. You don't know when, you don't know where, but you do know that it will occur.
I know you briefly mentioned that perhaps you did talk to some of the victims of the bridge collapse concerning insurance, and so I kind of want you to elaborate more on that, or tell me, if you're comfortable, any details or anything you can remember about that.
So quickly, when it happened, of course, being an insurance guy, I looked up everybody and I saw some of the names. And none of them were customers of ours, but we had conversation around policies and things, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And we're always very, we always put these solutions in front, right? I always tell my team, offer, because you don't know what can happen. You don't know. And if you think that they will automatically say no, then you're not taking care of this community. So I looked at some of the things, and I saw that it's always about price. Everything is about price, and so we couldn't get them. But I always think maybe if we did have them, they would have had this, and it's all about putting, needs-based. Like I don't want to sell you anything. I don't need to sell you anything. I just want to educate you. Right? I just want to put the thing down, educate you. This is what it's for. Right? No one is ever going to tell you, and I'm going to put it out there, use it or not, but something like life insurance, your grocery guy is never going to tell you. The gas station attendant, never going to tell you. Your doctor, maybe will never tell you. No one is ever going to educate you on that unless they have the products and say, hey, this is what this is what you should do, this is what you should get, and you make the decision, right?
Did the bridge collapse change the way you see Baltimore?
Yes, and here's why. I didn't realize that it was such a huge port, that it was such a necessary port. Shortly after, my son and I went to, he wanted to buy a car, and we were looking at some cars, and he is the looking online kind of guy, right? So he found something in North Carolina. He goes, Dad, I found a good deal in North Carolina. What are your thoughts? I said, well, we can do this. We can fly in. We can go and pick it up. So we did that. I said, but I want to make sure that we're good, that this car is something that you want to get. If it isn't, we're fine. We'll find our way back, but I want to make sure that. So he said, no, I did all my homework. It's a pretty good deal. I've got the finances. Da, da, da. I said, okay, let's go. Let's go pick it up. So we go pick it up. The guy there is telling me because of the collapse in Baltimore, they've had issues with their cars being brought in. So I didn't realize how big of a port and how necessary Baltimore is. I mean, Baltimore, now that I look at Baltimore, Baltimore is situated in such a strategic place because it's close to New York, it's close to DC, it's close to South. I mean, we are in the South, but, you know, to the southern states. So it's an important port. And I think differently about when I go by that port and look at it, and it's different. It hits me a little different now.
Do you think the Baltimore bridge collapse exposed larger issues about infrastructure and the safety of construction workers?
I think it exposed the infrastructure. Living in New York City, we're in a city of many, many, many bridges. And when I look at a bridge in New York City, whether it's the Manhattan, the Brooklyn, the Williamsburg, I see this massive protection around the pillars that hold the bridge. I mean, they're not small pillars. They're protected. And then the protection has protection. They're huge. And when I looked at that here, I was like, that's odd that the pillars were so exposed. Because if you look at the tape, the moment it hits, it collapses. So you have to think there was no give. I mean, there was no protection on that pillar. Now, you can say, well, that's a huge ship with millions of tons or whatever it had. It's going to go through anything. I don't know. There should have been more protection. The safety of that crew. You think about it, right? You say, well, why didn't they call immediately? Why didn't they get them off? But you have to understand the situation they were in, right? They were in cars eating lunch, maybe napping. So that first reaction to call, they might not have, right? They may not have had their phone in front of them. They were eating or napping or they were on a break. They were in vehicles. I think that moving forward, if something looks like it's going to occur, they need to be reactive. I'm sure someone saw it coming and said, they're not going to hit. Or if it does hit, it's just going to slide and the bridge is not going to collapse. And you think about it. You know, my wife always tells me she's afraid to go over bridges. And I tell her, this bridge is never going to fall. You know, we go because her mom lives right on the other side of the bridge, right? So we're always going over the bridge. Sometimes we do it late night, but usually we do it in the afternoon. I'm glad it didn't happen in the early mornings or like 9, 10 o'clock because it's a very congested bridge. But you never really think about something like this happening. And could they have put some other things in place? That's aftermath, right? Protecting them. When you see construction in Baltimore City, you always see the measures of protection, right? It's always something outside the norm that occurs. Like, you know, just recently in the 695 corridor, the car jumped over that barrier. But it wasn't because there was not enough protection. I feel that it's because this vehicle is going too fast. And then has an accident and jumps over that. So what could be done to protect our community from that occurring? If you go past that now, it's 40. I drove by there this morning, right? And I wanted to go a little faster to get here exactly at 10 o'clock. But the speed limit was 45. And as I drove by it this morning, I said, I'm not gonna go past that 50 miles per hour. I'm gonna respect it because when I looked to my left, I saw Latinos, because it was getting warm, right? Taking off their jackets, the cars were parked there, so they're taking out the water jugs and putting it on the side. Latinos. So I said, you know what? I am going to do the speed limit so that the cars behind me can also do the speed limit, right? So they're doing things to protect that community because that's the community that's doing the work, right? Yes, will you see another, immigrant community? Sure. But most of what you see when you turn your head, if you ever go down 695 and you go past that, turn your head. If they're working, you'll see that it's Latino community getting the work done. So if there's anything that can be done, or if there's ever some sort of a legislation around that, absolutely, I'm always going to opt to protect the community that's doing the work.
And I also understand that maybe in addition to some of the things you mentioned with the workers who were on that bridge, that many of them may have also been doing their work and fixing potholes during that time as well. And so my question is to you, aside from what you may have already mentioned earlier, is what other ways was your own life potentially affected by the disaster?
That's a great question because it goes emotional. You get emotional because we do have, family that are in that industry, the construction industry, not just in building the homes, and you'll see a lot of them building homes. You see them also in highways, in the train. My young brother just told me a few days back that he decided in New York City that he wasn't going to do the conducting in the train. He's going to be a flagman on the railroads. I was like, are you kidding? I mean, you're right there in the trenches. He goes, yeah, but that's, I like this, and I'm not afraid of heights. So I go to the railroad, the bridges, and I'm okay crossing tracks. And I thought about what that meant, and a lot of the conversations I've had with my Latino customers. Because sometimes I always ask, hey, what do you do? And they say, I paint bridges. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I paint bridges. I'm like, what do you mean you paint bridges? He goes, yeah, I just climb up. But I always have harnesses. But sometimes it's uncomfortable. And I take them off for a moment. I'm like, while you're up there? He goes, yeah, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm like, I've gained a new respect for this community that comes to the United States and does this kind of work. Not because they did it in their country, but because it was the only way that they can put food on the table. So they risk their lives to put food on the table. And you may think that construction is not a risky job, but it is if the wall falls on you. And we had that incident happen with those Latino guys that the wall fell. It is when you try to cut a corner and you don't put those metal dividers on those trenches that you're building, and because you want to cut a corner, you don't put it in because you don't think that this is going to fall, and it falls. So I've gained a lot of respect, and when I see it, I'm proud of what they're doing. I'm proud of that community. That you may not think you're putting their lives at risk, but as I drove by there at 60 miles an hour, and they were so comfortably doing their work, not thinking that anything is going to happen, and it could, I felt a certain way. It's like these guys are risking their lives so that we can have nice roads, right? We should respect it. We should respect them and slow it down. Or try not to drive. And then I saw a lot of drivers trying to get around and honking their horn and doing all that nonsense. So yeah, you look at it different.
Thank you, Mr. Rosario. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to add, or maybe anything we touched on briefly that you wanted to add on to?
The only thing that I would like to add is there's a ton of things that you can hear, that you can listen, that's negative about this community, not just the Latino community, but immigrant community that is super negative. But when you sit down with this community and you chat with them and you try to provide whatever to this community and have conversation about their financial wealth, about their financial being, about their work, about the family, they're super similar to us. I mean, there's no difference. Everybody is looking for a better life. Now, you can say, well, they should have done it the right way. Yeah, well, the right way doesn't work. The right way does not work. If you got to wait 20 years to come into this country, but that time your kids are 20 years old, I mean, the need, it doesn't work, right? So while the community is here and you're engaging with this community, you have to take care of community. And look at what they're doing. They're rebuilding Baltimore City. Baltimore City in 1997 or 1995 was not what it looks like now. Where we are right now, Morgan State, it does not look like it did back in the 90s. I believe that we need to respect one another, no matter what. If simply because you don't look like I do, then that's my go-to reaction, then we're always going to be in in the situation that we're in today, right? And I take it from my household. You know, I have to teach within. And I teach my kids, not when they're fully grown, but when they're small. We have to take care of our young kids and teach them education. Sink more money in education, right? Make schools a better place for them to learn. Celebrate the diverse culture that you have, right? My color of my skin, I cannot say to you, hey, I'm American. No, it's always going to be, where are you from, right? We need to respect our cultures and just understand that the Latino community is here to stay. The Latino community is here to rebuild. And it's just getting bigger and bigger. I thank the Latino community for the situation that Baltimore is in today. Because without them, without that community, we would not be rebuilding. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rosario, for participating in this interview. If there's nothing else, this concludes the interview.